occupy all four decks. We'll have coffee and donuts in the galley at the back of the main deck. Here on the second deck, outside the gift shop. Up on the third deck, there's a snack bar toward the front of the boat. And up on the third deck, there's an open perimeter and enclosed.
Hi, Dick. Hi.
And the fourth deck is
hello.
Hi, Megan. Bye.
On the main floor in the gift shop.
Is a 1950 vintage Piper Super Cub. He is going to take off right next to us in that little airplane and land for your benefit. Notice how highly maneuverable the aircraft is. These aren't just toys, they are an important part of the lifeline of rural Alaska. And he's going to take off at about 200 feet. Now, if you would be careful not to block the view of people behind you, he's got a nice headwind. He needs about a 40 mile an hour airspeed to get airborne. And I'd say down probably before that little airplane is a bit tired on the other side of the runway, he'll be in the air. The doctors have to certify where the baby was born. Is the back of Discovery 2.
Yeah.
You look across the river.
I don't feel like I'm just being focused on.
In a moment, you'll see that airplane coming right out of the sky, about 3 top level laps down. He's doing nicely. He's in a power glide, 30 miles an hour even. That headwind, he'll come to a stop in just about 150 to 200 feet, right here next to the front of Discovery 3. A beautiful short field takeoff and landing for you by Bush Pilot Bill. 100 tires, about 4 pounds of air pressure. They allow him to take off and land on some pretty rugged ground.
Overdrive, boys.
husband Dave over here, and he's got a couple of puppies just about ready to crawl over the logs like that. Now, are you able to judge from their precocious behavior at this stage whether one of those is going to be a good leader someday?
Well, but his story goes on from there, because while we were training him for the 1988 racing season, he became very seriously ill, and I had to rush him down to Anchorage to a veterinary hospital to try and save his life. We set up a cot next to his kennel so that I could sleep with him there, day and night petting him and willing him to live. And then 1.5 months later, he went on to do the impossible. He led me to victory in the Iditarod, and he did it by pulling me through a blinding snowstorm that stopped all of my competitors. So we finished 14 hours in front of the second place musher who couldn't make it through the storm. And that made Granite the first lead dog to ever win 3 consecutive Iditarods.
What a story. Get to spend some time out on the trail.
Well, yeah, these are actually puppies from 5 different litters, and they are now sort of what we call teenagers. They're a little under a year old.
Kind of like a 16-year-old with a driver's license. But now, these guys are running around, they're getting in the water, they seem to be cooling off. How do you train a wintertime athlete on a hot summer day like this?
Well, we look for the mornings when we've got below 50 degrees, and then we can have the dogs pull a 4-wheel cart back here on our winter trails. But we don't get too many of those right now. This morning we were working with this group of dogs. We had them hooked up to the dog merry-go-round, and they just love to pull this round and round.
But now we're going to see the dogs pulling a sled down at the village, and that's pretty exciting for us. Who's going to be in charge of that demonstration?
Well, David will be joining you down there. We have 8 of our champion dogs, and they'll all demonstrate a little bit about dog mushing.
And David, by the way, folks, is Dave Munson back there, a champion of the Yukon Quest. Right, young musher coming up through the ranks. And a great champion right here. We want to thank you once again, a 4-time winner of the Iditarod, Susan Butcher. Thank you once again, Susan. We always appreciate the break. What we call glacial flour. Now those glaciers are constantly moving, and as they move, they pulverize the mountains into a fine powder about the consistency of the flour in your kitchen. We call it glacial flour because of that consistency. It's about like talcum powder, and it stays in suspension in the Tanana River, and actually makes the river look kind of shallow.
I said, look at the filth in the muck, but it's Alaskan filth and muck.
That makes
I've
it
seen
better.
New York filth.
All right.
And it makes it look a little bit like they're pouring rich cream into wheat or coffee. And the Athabasca
Here we go
people have
again
a
with
name
all
for
this
this. They
drink
call this
sort of
neutral
stuff.
oil.
It's definitely a huge
Neutral oil means wetting of the rivers.
Huh?
And you'll see that silt has actually been blown up into the mouth of the river. We got a pretty good wind coming at us right now. But that is one of the influences on this boat and on the river.
supposed to be on that boat. What am I doing here? Pump house. Can't be here and on the boat at the same time.
Keep your eyes upstream for that. You'll get a good view of that from the ramp, by the way, or the deck in front of Steamboat Landing.
There it goes.
Yep, okay, take a look upstream, folks. Here comes that airplane. He's moving right smartly toward us. Already up on the step, as they call it. Moving very nicely. Right in here, see a little bit of flaps. Give himself some lift and he's on his way.